Good evening, and welcome to Cross-Examination. Access to healthcare is arguably one of the most significant and debated topics of our time. Is it a basic human right, an entitlement that every person deserves, regardless of their circumstances? Or is it a service, a commodity subject to the complex and often harsh realities of economics? Tonight, we are debating a bold proposition. Should all countries have universal health care? To help us navigate this complex issue, we have two distinguished experts. Dr. Ben Carter is a renowned public health physician with extensive first-hand experience in various global health systems. And Dr. Evelyn Reed is a leading economist and healthcare policy advisor who has consulted for multiple governments. We will begin with opening statements, followed by a moderated discussion, and conclude with closing remarks. Dr. Carter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Isabella. I want to begin by framing this issue in the simplest, most human terms possible. Healthcare is a fundamental human right. It is not a luxury good, and it should never be a privilege reserved for the wealthy. The idea that a person's financial status should determine whether they live or die, whether they receive treatment for a curable illness, or whether they are bankrupted by a medical emergency, is morally indefensible in the 21st century. This is the ethical foundation upon which the argument for universal healthcare is built. But beyond the moral imperative, universal healthcare is also a profoundly smart long-term investment for any nation. A healthy population is a productive population. When people have access to preventative care, a cornerstone of most universal systems, we can stop diseases before they become critical and costly. This reduces the immense future burden of expensive emergency treatments and chronic disease management. Think of the economic potential unleashed when workers are not absent due to preventable illness, and when children can attend school healthy and ready to learn. Furthermore, these systems foster a powerful sense of national unity and social cohesion. When every citizen contributes to and benefits from the same system, it reinforces the principle that we are all in this together. It prevents the social fractures that occur when health crises push families into poverty and despair. Universal healthcare is not just a policy. It is the hallmark of a just, compassionate, and intelligent society. It is a declaration that every life has value.
Isabella, thank you. Dr. Carter speaks with great passion, and the goal of ensuring better health for all is one that I sincerely share. However, a noble aspiration does not automatically translate into a practical or effective policy. The proposition that all countries should have universal health care is a dangerously simplistic solution to an incredibly complex problem. First and foremost, we must confront the issue of economic feasibility. Implementing and sustaining a universal healthcare system requires a colossal financial commitment. For many developing nations, and even for some developed ones, the resources are simply not there. Where does this money come from? The answer is inevitably higher taxes on an already struggling populace, or drastic cuts to other essential public services like education, infrastructure, or sanitation. This can lead to spiraling national debt, inflation, and economic instability that ultimately harms everyone. Secondly, this is a, quote, one-size-fits-all mandate imposed on a world of immense diversity. Countries have vastly different economic capacities, demographic profiles, political structures, and cultural priorities. A model that is successful in a small, wealthy, and homogeneous nation in Scandinavia may be utterly disastrous if applied to a large, diverse, low-income country in Africa or Asia. National sovereignty must include the right for a country to design a healthcare solution that is tailored to its unique context and resources. Finally, we must consider the potential negative impacts on quality and innovation. Large, state-run monopolies often lead to long wait times for essential procedures, limited patient choice in providers, and bureaucratic inefficiency. Without the engine of competition that drives the private sector, we risk stifling the very innovation in medicine and technology that leads to better treatments and cures. The question is not if we should improve global health, but how. A rigid, universal mandate is an ideological straitjacket, not a practical answer.
Dr. Reed, Dr. Carter makes a compelling case for universal healthcare as a long-term economic investment, suggesting that preventing illness is ultimately cheaper than treating it. From your economic perspective, does this long-term view ever justify the immediate and often massive upfront cost?
That's a critical question, Isabella. The logic of prevention being cheaper than cure is sound in a vacuum. However, governments do not operate in a vacuum. They operate in the world of immediate budgets, debt ceilings, and voter accountability. The long term is a luxury that many administrations, especially in unstable economies, simply cannot afford to prioritize. A massive upfront investment in a universal system funded by debt could trigger a sovereign debt crisis, devalue the currency, and lead to hyperinflation. The resulting economic collapse would cause far more widespread suffering than the health issues it was intended to solve. It's like telling a family that can't afford groceries today that they should be investing in a retirement fund. While the advice is wise in principle, it's disconnected from their immediate reality. A more pragmatic approach involves targeted investments. Public-private partnerships, for instance, can fund specific initiatives like vaccination programs or maternal health clinics without bankrupting the state. This allows for incremental progress without risking catastrophic economic failure. We can build a healthier society piece by piece on a solid economic foundation rather than building a beautiful house on sand.
Dr. Carter, Dr. Reed raises a crucial point about feasibility and national context. How can a low-income country already struggling to fund basic education and infrastructure realistically be expected to fund and manage a complex universal healthcare system? Is this proposition truly universal, or is it only achievable for the wealthy?
Dr. Reed's point about feasibility is valid, and it's a challenge we must address head-on. But to suggest it's an insurmountable barrier is, I believe, a form of defeatism. No one is suggesting that a developing nation should replicate the German or Canadian system overnight. The path to universal healthcare is a journey, not a single leap. Implementation can and should be phased. A country might start by guaranteeing free primary care for all, focusing on vaccinations, maternal health, and managing common infectious diseases. That alone would have a transformative impact. Over time, as the economy grows, partly fueled by that healthier population, the system can be expanded to include more specialized services. Furthermore, this isn't a journey that nations must take alone. International cooperation is key. The global community, through organizations like the World Health Organization and the World Bank, has a responsibility to provide financial aid and technical support. We've seen this work with global initiatives to fight AIDS and malaria. To say a country cannot afford to invest in its people's health is to accept a perpetual cycle of poverty. Poor health leads to a weak workforce, which leads to a weak economy, which leads to an inability to fund healthcare. We have to break that cycle, and investing in health is the most effective place to start.
Tonight, we have debated not the destination, but the map. We all want a world with better health outcomes. However, I must insist that the method for getting there is what truly matters. We must champion flexibility, foster innovation, and support market-driven solutions that can be carefully tailored to each nation's unique economic and social fabric. A dogmatic, one-size-fits-all mandate for universal healthcare risks imposing unmanageable costs, stifling medical progress, and disrespecting national sovereignty. Let us empower countries to find their own best path forward, rather than forcing them down a single, predetermined road that may lead to ruin. True progress requires pragmatism, not just passion.
In the end, this debate comes back to a simple moral question. What kind of world do we want to live in? While the path to universal coverage has its challenges, they are challenges of logistics, not of principle. To argue that it is too expensive or too complicated is to place a price tag on human life. The cost of inaction measured in lost lives, shattered families, and unrealized human potential, is infinitely higher. I believe in a world where a child's chance at a long and healthy life does not depend on the accident of their birthplace or the size of their parents' bank account. Achieving this is the ultimate measure of our shared humanity.
Thank you, Dr. Carter and Dr. Reed, for an insightful and spirited debate. You have given us all a great deal to consider on this vital issue. The question of how we care for one another on a global scale is one that will continue to be asked. Thank you for joining us. Good night.